Iranian-backed Houthi militants held military exercises in Yemen just a day after being hit by U.S.-led airstrikes, more in defiance than a show of force, a flex of military muscle on land, for a battle being waged at sea. U.S. operators say the cargo ship Gibraltar Eagle was hit by an anti-ship ballistic missile 100 miles off the coast of Yemen in the Gulf of Aden.
That's right, Houthi rebels have in fact retaliated against the United States and the United Kingdom for them carrying out airstrikes in Yemen in retaliation of Houthi rebels, basically interrupting international trade in the Red Sea. Now the strikes were the West's response to those Houthi attacks on cargo ships in the Red Sea. It has caused all sorts of problem when it comes to international trade, and considering the fact that these cargo ships would need to travel through the Horn of Africa to kind of get around the Red Sea, it would increase the price of products as much as 40%. And of course, that wouldn't bode too well for President Joe Biden and his bid for re-election. We'll get to all of that in just a moment. But first, a few other updates in regard to the escalating tensions in the area. An American-owned container ship was hit with ballistic missiles by the Houthis in their latest alleged provocation. On Monday, US Central Command said in a statement that Houthis fired an anti-ship ballistic missile from Houthi-controlled areas of Yemen and struck the MV Gibraltar Eagle, a Marshall Islands flagged US-owned and operated container ship. Now the ship, according to the United States, sustained no significant damage and its crew was luckily uninjured. A missile launched from Yemen earlier in that day also came down before it reached the coast. And using missiles and drones, the Yemeni militants have carried out more than 24 assaults in the Red Sea since the beginning of November. Now they're saying that they're carrying out these assaults as a direct response to Israel's war in Gaza. At first, they claimed that they were specifically targeting ships that did business with Israel or were owned by Israeli businessmen. But there have been other ships, cargo ships, namely, that have been caught up in this violence. A Houthi military spokesperson by the name of Yahya Saree confirmed in a statement late Monday that the group had targeted an American ship in the Gulf of Aden with these ballistic missiles. He said, quote, "We consider all American and British ships participating in the aggression against our country as hostile targets." The spokesperson said the Houthis would continue maritime attacks until the aggression stops and the siege on Gaza is lifted, he said, adding that any further attacks on Yemen by the United States and Britain will not remain without response and punishment. And I see a lot of people kind of downplaying the power or strength of these Houthi rebels as they continue their attacks. Keep in mind that the United States backed the Saudi coalition in its war against the Houthi rebels in Yemen, and they lost. So this is not a group of people who give up easily. They're incredibly persistent, and there's a lot of debate going on right now in regard to whether or not Biden should be able to call for these airstrikes without the approval of Congress. There have been some Congress members who have spoken out against this, including Representative Ro Khanna. But the fact of the matter is, when it comes to situations like this that are deemed an emergency by the executive branch, typically they can carry out these airstrikes unilaterally. The real concern is whether this will continue to escalate tensions in the region and basically spread to a more expanded regional war. So we'll get to that conversation in a moment. But Cenk, any initial thoughts?
Yeah, so this is very complicated. So on the one hand, if they hit an American ship, do we have a right to retaliate? Of course we do, right? On the other hand, so we don't want to get into a much broader regional war. And to Anna's point, if you think, oh, the Houthis in Yemen, Yemen's one of the poorest countries, etc., this will be easy. Yeah, I remember when they said they throw roses at our feet in Iraq and Afghanistan. It will not be easy. Everything is guerrilla warfare now. So whether it's on the ground or in the seas, and what has changed warfare, and we have not quite caught up to this fact. The Russians have, because of what they experienced in Ukraine, is drones. So drones change the dynamic both in the sea and on the ground, and they have plenty of drones, and they can get more and more drones. So there's several different questions here. One, when should we attack? under what circumstances, meaning like, does Congress need to act before we attack, et cetera, right? So I do not agree that we should attack because other countries' trading ships have been attacked and it has affected trading routes. Okay, I mean, this is called Operation Prosperity Guardian. So they're very brazen about it. It isn't really about national security, it's about protecting profits. So understand that if they don't go by the Red Sea, they have to go around the Horn of Africa. If they do, it increases the price for those goods on there by 10%. You can say, hey, for inflation, maybe I do kill people. I don't know, I wouldn't, right? But basically we're talking about 10% here in profits or resources, however you want to call it. And so for that, we're going to counterattack. All right, if you thought it's like the old days, the US can do anything they want, we just go bomb them and we're done with it. Maybe you say yes under those circumstances. It depends on your moral compass in some ways. But in this day and age, it's not that easy. You might trigger a gigantic regional war because you wanted to save 10% and you called it guarding prosperity. And it might not work out that way at all.
So a few things. Number one, you are right that it would hurt profits for corporations, but it would also lead to inflationary pressures, which of course the Biden administration is concerned about, because if that does in fact happen, then he's gonna be the one punished by it, and we're dealing with an election season. But putting that aside, it would also be inflationary pressures that would overwhelmingly impact the poorest people in the country, and not just in our country, around the world. And it would also lead to
the richest people in the world.
Of course it would, but hold on, let me finish my point, Cenk. You said that it would increase prices by 10%. That's actually incorrect. It is increasing, the shipping costs have increased 40% for the cargo ships that are going around and not going through the Red Sea. And it's already leading to concerns in some countries, including like the UK, for instance. They're worried about supply shortages when it comes to pharmaceutical drugs that they need for their patients there. So it is actually a lot more complicated than corporations bad, we're just concerned about corporate profits. There's also some concern about what this is gonna do to vulnerable people across the globe who rely on.
I don't know about that 40% number, Anna. I read 10%, and wherever it is between 10 and 40, it affects different people in different ways. This is not all trade, but it is a big part. It's 12% of the trade of the whole world, okay? But they're mainly targeting ships that are going to Israel, not perfectly, or as Anna explained. But so maybe it increases prices for some of the freights that are on those particular ships in Israel. I don't know that it increases at 40% here or in Canada or in Botswana. I don't know. But so the people that it affects most and the economy that it affects most is definitely Israel. And so now we're gonna go to war to protect their prosperity? Okay, so, and by the way, there's a giant alternative solution, which is end the occupation, end the war. So I know in America that's unthinkable. We must imprison the Palestinians for the rest of time, and we must help Israel butcher them. So, but oh my God, I don't want my prices and my profits to go down. So, well, now we're in a conundrum, but it's actually not a conundrum. You could just do the moral thing and say we're not sending Israel any more money until they end the war and they end the occupation. All the problems are solved, and you're more on you do better on the economy and you do better on morality. But of course, Washington would never consider doing the right thing. So here we are at the precipice of a wider war.
Okay, so you're right about that, and ultimately I agree with you in that the best course of action for the United States would be to apply pressure to Israel in regard to how they're carrying out this war in Gaza. This is what the Houthi rebels are claiming is firing them up, and this is what's leading to them carrying out these attacks in the Red Sea. There are some who argue, no, that's just their cover story. All they're really worried about is increasing their visibility and their recruitment efforts, and they're basically exploiting this war to recruit. But I mean, the Houthi rebels weren't carrying out these attacks in the Red Sea prior to this. And they have, for the most part, attacked cargo ships that do business with Israel. Other ships have been involved. For instance, on November, there was the week-long humanitarian pause. And during that pause, the Houthi rebels continued their attacks on those ships, including one on November 25th. Houthi rebels attacked the CMA CGM SYMI. I don't know what that is, but it was a ship traveling from Dubai to the Far East. The cargo ship was struck by an Iranian drone, but was lightly damaged. And then on November 26th, again, this is the second attack during the humanitarian pause. They attacked a tanker named Central Park in the Gulf of Aden, and it was sailing from Morocco to India. So that one didn't even have anything to do with Israel whatsoever. And so, look, both things can be true. You can both agree that just simply bombing Yemen isn't the right course of action. That should be the absolute last resort. And you should try to find ways to actually respond to the concerns that not just the Houthi rebels, but countries around the world are having in regard to how Israel is carrying out this war in Gaza. But I think it would be a mistake to also downplay the impact of those Houthi attacks, not just on some of the innocent people who are on those cargo ships who aren't doing anything wrong, right? They're just doing their jobs. They shouldn't have to fear for their lives as they're doing their jobs. But it's also gonna have an impact on prices and our supply chains, namely when it comes to critical, essential things like pharmaceutical drugs.
Yeah, so let me make a distinction between what we want and what is possible. So sometimes people say absurd things like, well, we should tell the Houthis to cut it out. Okay, Houthis, cut it out. Yeah, do I want them bombing the ships? No, I don't want them bombing the ships. But us not wanting it doesn't matter at all. So then the question is, okay, like, because some people in America, because mainstream media frames it this way, thinks that if you just tell Hamas to cut it out or the Houthis to cut it out, that has an effect. That has zero effect, none. So get to realistic solutions. So now, how do we effectuate what we want, which is to get them to stop bombing the ships? Well, there's a couple of ways. One is we strike back, and when we just did that, and did it stop them? No, it didn't stop them at all. The only way you're gonna stop them is if you start a giant war with Yemen, which is then gonna jump to Iran, by the way, but you'll never get out of Yemen in the first place, because it'll be guerrilla warfare, land, sea, air, etc., and we'll be bogged down in a disastrous war over there. Otherwise, what are you gonna do? You're gonna take over all of Yemen? No, they're gonna be able to fire rockets from Yemen ad nauseum. You can kill more of them, but it's not gonna stop it. So I'm being honest with you guys and realistic. The idea that, well, we pound our chest, we bombed them, we killed them, and then they stopped. They didn't stop. It didn't work. It's not gonna work. It's dumb. The only way to get them to stop is to get Israel to end the war and the occupation. Well, you say, well, Israel doesn't want to do that. They want to keep those prisoners. 5 million Palestinian prisoners. Okay, well then those bombing isn't gonna stop, no matter how much we want it to stop. I don't want prices going up. I don't want innocent people getting killed. But you have to be realistic about how to get things done. And peace is the way to get things done. Saying we're gonna keep bombing Yemen and maybe drag Iran into it is a terrible strategy. And by the way, Ro Khanna, Pramila Jayapal, and the others are right. One that you require congressional authorization for. Anna's also right that no president cares about the Constitution. They ignore the Constitution all the time. They do all these bombings without any congressional authorization. But yes, you're supposed to get one. Why are you supposed to get one? So you don't accidentally drag us into an unwinnable war.
Yeah, and look, I would just like Congress to stop whining about that. And if they genuinely want to ensure that the president has their authorization before he carries out any military activity, well then do something about it. Don't just complain about it. I just think they oftentimes like to complain about it, but when push comes to shove, they don't want to take responsibility for approving the executive branch's military activity because they don't want that blowback for their elections.
100%.
Okay.
Say, you know what? You drop one more bomb, President Biden, and you don't get any defense spending. Or you cut half of defense spending, or 10% of defense spending. You have any idea how much Washington will panic? They're like, oh no, the beloved defense contractors and the beautiful juicy bribes they give us.
Totally.
They'll all panic. All right, are you gonna use your power or are you gonna bark like a little dog all day?
They're gonna bark like little dogs, that's what they do.
And that's what Biden does with Netanyahu, which we'll get to later in the show. Oh, please, you keep doing massacres, just a little less massacres. And Netanyahu slaps him with the back of his hand, because get the hell out of here. And so these are all totally useless, powerless people. The only people that could stop any of this is the right-wing government of Israel, so wish us luck.
Thanks for watching. If you become a member, you get to watch all this ad-free, except for, of course, this ad. Still, hit the join button below.